Hey guys, so obviously due to today's events, we canceled class, so you guys could reach out to family or friends or whoever needed to. Um, but I wanted to still get your notes to you, so I am screencasting our lecture for today, and we'll send you a link and put it on Canvas as well. So today we're going to start talking about the Supreme Court cases. Not all of them, there's thousands of them, but the landmark cases. So what is considered a landmark case is whether or not it has made a dramatic impact on society. So there are two kinds of an opinion that a Supreme Court justice can give. A majority opinion and a dissenting opinion. So majority opinion is agreed on by more than half of the members of a court. It is the winning opinion, so to say. Someone who is on the opposite side of that is on the dissenting opinion. So it is written by one or more of the judges that disagrees with the majority. This gives the opposing view an opportunity to voice concerns, although it doesn't change the outcome of the ruling. So the very first case we're going to look at is Marbury versus Madison. You should know Marbury versus Madison right by now because it is what establishes judicial review. This is the Supreme Court case where essentially the Supreme Court gets their power. So William Marbury was appointed as the Justice of the Peace by John Adams the night before Thomas Jefferson takes over. Now, obviously, he didn't get his papers until later, it may not go into effect because you'd have a different president by then. Well, basically, Marbury sued Madison and said, who was the Secretary of State at the time, and said, no, I still get to be a judge. Like, you can't take that away from me. Well, this all came down to the Supreme Court deciding whether or not he could be a judge. And this was the first time that the Supreme Court got to make a decision like that. So it gave them the power to review the processes of the judicial system, hence judicial review and solidifying their power from here on out. So when you think of Marbury versus Madison, immediately think judicial review. Next we have still Marbury versus Madison. I forgot there were two slides. So this establishes the Supreme Court as an equal branch of government, equal to the executive branch and the legislative branch, giving us our three equal branches, and like I said before, establishes judicial review. McCulloch versus Maryland. McCulloch versus Maryland, don't get it confused with the other M and M one, but this one helps establish state rights. So this says that a state cannot sue a federal government. This also says that the federal government is supreme to a state government. Sorry, not that they can't sue them, they cannot tax them. So Maryland cannot tax the federal government, which is where this came from. Basically, with our idea of federalism and the separation of powers, it still gives supremacy to the federal government. This is important because of the supremacy clause in Article 6 of the Constitution. So when you think McCulloch versus Maryland, think supremacy. It's easy to remember this when you think about how small Maryland is in comparison to other states and in comparison to the whole country. So little old Maryland doesn't have control over a big old federal government. Gibbons versus Ogden. This is a maritime law case. So New York granted monopoly of waterway traffic to Fulton Livingston Company. Ogden was granted a license under the Fulton Livingston Company to operate his steamboat from New Jersey to New York. Now, obviously, if there's two states involved, that's when it becomes interstate. That's what interstate means. But this is a federal jurisdiction case because we know more than one state is involved. So Thomas Gibbons granted federal license to operate. So when you think Gibbons versus Ogden, think interstate commerce because of New York and New Jersey. Best way to remember this one, as silly as it sounds, what sound does a boat make? Gib, 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 gib. I know that's silly, but you'll remember it. So the ruling of this case was that only federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. A state does not. Now let's think this through. If you have New York and New Jersey involved, New York cannot make a law that involves New Jersey. Therefore, only the federal government can make a law regulating trade between states because multiple states are involved. Think back to when we talked about jurisdiction. If multiple states are involved, it immediately goes to a federal level. Engel versus Vitale. So Engel versus Vitale is basically the prayer in schools case. This was the prayer in yellow that you see that the New York State Board and all the students in New York State recited every morning. Now, that's a little different than what we're used to because you would never catch us praying in school nowadays as a group because of this case. So this case basically said that you can't force people to pray in school because that's imposing religion on other people and therefore violates their First Amendment right. So obviously there were parents upset about this because perhaps some non-Christian students were being forced to pray every morning. But the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Engel and saying that this definitely violates the First Amendment because it's imposing religion in a non-denominational, non-religious setting, and that it's of vital importance to separate church and state, state being the school in this case. Next, we have Tinker versus Des Moines. This is Des Moines City Schools. So this was during the Vietnam War. Mary Beth Tinker and Chris Eckhart wore black armbands that you see there. They were protesting the war. They didn't say anything. They didn't do anything. They simply wore the armbands with the peace sign. They were asked to remove their armbands, and they refused. Because they refused, they were suspended. They took it to court saying that this violated their First Amendment right to freedom of speech. What do you guys think? Of course, the Supreme Court ruled that these were not offensive, these were not disruptive, and as long as speech is not disruptive, it cannot be limited. So students do not get rid of all of their First Amendment rights because they enter school. Think of the things you wear to school. Now, obviously, you have a dress code, so yours is a little different. But if you wanted to wear a shirt with some sort of political slogan on it, you couldn't get in trouble for it because it's free speech, as long as it is not disruptive and it is not essentially hateful. Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer. So Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer is very interesting because basically the school newspaper was running an article about teen pregnancy and divorce, and he thought that this should not be talked about in the school newspaper, so he took it out. Well, the students who did the school newspaper thought that this violated their First Amendment right to free speech and sued the principal. So what did the Supreme Court say? They said this was not a violation of First Amendment rights because it was a school newspaper, that students do not have the same free speech rights in school as adults do in public. Think about this. Tinker versus Des Moines, they were not causing an issue. They were not being disruptive. There was no hate speech involved, and it was not school sponsored. That's the big difference. Hazelwood versus Kohlmeyer was a school-sponsored paper saying something that contradicts the values of what the school believed. Therefore, because it was school-sponsored, the school had supremacy to make the decision to take it out of the newspaper. The way to remember this one, newspapers are made from paper. Paper is made from wood. So Hazelwood is the newspaper case. Texas versus Johnson, 1989. So in 1984, Gregory Johnson burned a American flag in protest of Ronald Reagan, chanting "Red, white, and blue, we spit on you." And boy, were people mad. So he was tried and convicted under Texas law that made flag burning illegal and was sentenced to 1 year in jail and $2,000 fine. So what happened? Well, he sued. And he said, or what was said was that it was not illegal. He did have the right to do that. He shouldn't, but he did. And he has the right to do that because it's his beliefs. Mapp versus Ohio. Dolly Mapps was suspected of harboring a fugitive. Police showed up. They wouldn't let her in. And the cops leave. 3 hours later, they burst into her house, holding up a paper saying it was a warrant. Plot twist, not a warrant. Mapp's attorneys show up, and the cops refuse to let the attorney in. Upon further inspection, they find out that she has lewd photos and books. Now, we don't really know what they mean by lewd photos and books. Use your imagination. She has things that she shouldn't have. But here's what happened. They took this evidence without actually having a warrant. And we know that because of the Fourth Amendment, you can't do that. So no evidence that is illegally seized or seized without a warrant can be used in court. This follows under the exclusionary rule. The way to remember this is that you have to have a map to search for things, like a treasure. So map is a search and seizure case. Next is the ever infamous Roe versus Wade. So Roe versus Wade happened in 1973. Jane Roe, who obviously that's not her real name, wanted an abortion in Texas where it was illegal. She said this violated her right to privacy, which she inferred from the First, Fourth, Fifth, Ninth, and 14th Amendment. And the Supreme Court ruled in her favor because only a woman and her doctor can determine what's best for her during the first trimester, which means the first 12 weeks. So essentially, they said that it was her decision. It could not be up to whether or not a state believed it or another person believed it because it was her body. So this gives women the right to an abortion within the first trimester. I don't really have another way to remember this one, but it's probably one of the most famous ones. You probably know it anyways. And lastly, we are going to end today with Miranda versus Arizona. Ernesto Miranda was charged with rape, kidnapping, and robbery. He was not informed of his rights prior to his interrogation. And during the 2-hour interrogation, he confessed of his crime and was convicted to 30 years in prison. Now, you're saying, what does that even matter? Well, because he confessed, he did it. Well, he didn't know that he could plead the fifth and not say anything. So the Supreme Court ruled that detained criminals prior to questioning must be informed of their constitutional right to an attorney and against self-incrimination. This goes with your Fifth Amendment right to due process and your Sixth Amendment right to a speedy and fair trial. The way to remember this is that you must be read your Miranda rights. This is where we get that from. Your Miranda rights being, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be assigned to you. So criminals have to be read their Miranda rights because of Miranda versus Arizona. All right, guys, this is where we are going to stop for today. I hope to see you on Thursday, and I hope that you watch this before this so we can just pick up on Thursday. I will talk to you later. Send me an email if you need anything. Bye, guys.